Let me just start with you, if I could, Professor Shaw. You talked about the fact that there have been lots of rulings against the Trump administration. That's absolutely statistically true. I disagree with almost all of them. In fact, I think all of them. But the issue of this hearing really isn't the rulings, is it? It's the remedies. Would you agree? And those are distinct things. You may think that the ruling is quite correct, but that's actually not what we're talking about here today. We could have a hearing on that. Maybe we should. But we're talking today about the remedy. And the question is a remedy that binds parties who are not before the court, is that an appropriate thing? I mean, aren't you concerned about judges binding non-parties in their remedies? You may love the ruling, but even if you do, don't you think it's a little bit anomalous for courts to be going out there and binding parties who are not before them? I mean, is that something we want to encourage?
Senator, I think that judges have been issuing rulings that impact non-parties since Marbury versus Madison, right?
So you're not concerned about it?
I'm not. I absolutely think that they can be abused, and
well, no, wait a minute.
Folks, buckle up. Because what we just witnessed in that Senate hearing wasn't just a spirited debate between legal minds. It was a cold, hard look at everything wrong with the weaponization of our legal system. Today, we're going to break down the latest judicial circus involving Professor Shaw and Senator Josh Hawley. And let me tell you, it's Exhibit A in how the left distorts the law to punish their political enemies. So let's lay this out in plain terms. The hearing wasn't about whether rulings against President Trump were fair or not, although trust me, we'll get to that. The real issue was this: should a single federal judge, often a political appointee, have the power to bind people who aren't even part of a case? It's a question of principle. But as Senator Hawley exposed in this hearing, the left doesn't operate on principles. They operate on power. There it is. That one line tells you everything you need to know. When a court stops Biden, travesty. When a court stops Trump, totally fine. That's not democracy. That's lawfare.
Wait a minute. You were very concerned about it just a couple of years ago. Yeah. You said in response to a nationwide injunction on the Biden FDA's mifepristone rules, and I quote, "This injunction's a travesty for principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law."
I think I've been consistent today. That was issued by Judge Kaczmarek in a single judge division. They're a problem. Those are a problem.
With him personally? Wait,
no.
Your testimony is if it's issued by Judge Kaczmarek, it's bad?
No, sir.
It's personal?
That is not my testimony.
Is the problem with the injunction? You were criticizing the universal injunction
issued by a judge in a single judge division. I've been very clear today that those are a problem.
By a Republican judge in a Republican division, then it's bad.
No, Senator.
Otherwise, it's fine.
No, Senator. I think that single judge divisions are a problem.
What is the principal difference? I'm looking for a principle. I understand you hate the president. I understand you love all of these rulings against him. You and I both know that's not a principle. You're a lawyer. What's the principle that divides when issuing a nationwide injunction is okay, when it's not? When the Biden administration was subject to nationwide injunctions, you said that they were travesties for the principle of democracy. You didn't say the referral to Judge Kaczmarek was a travesty. You said his injunction was a travesty for principles of democracy. Yeah. So, in other words, the translation is just you didn't like the outcome. Is that right?
No, Senator. Look, we're talking about, I don't think Article 3 precludes this form of relief. So we are talking about prudential consideration.
Prudential meaning political?
No.
Then give me, so far I have yet to hear it. You've been questioned by multiple senators. I have yet to hear a principle other than the fact when you like the ruling, you think it's great to apply it nationally, including non-parties. When you don't like the ruling, it is a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law.
Look, Senator, I'll say I think I am self-aware enough to know that my view of the underlying legal question, I am sure colors my perception of the remedy. I think that we should all acknowledge that. And yet I do think
and why shouldn't we stop nationwide injunctions for everybody?
I think that's
what we're talking about today.
Because I'm not willing to leave without relief non-parties who are
injured. No, you're not willing to leave without the ability to bind President Trump.
No, I
right?
think that...
I mean, when it's Biden, it's okay. No. When it's Biden, it's a travesty. When it's Trump in office, it's no holds barred, whatever it takes, right?
I believe in a powerful...
What was it that President Biden's staff said? We've got to do undemocratic, unconstitutional things to save democracy. Why isn't this the same thing?
I believe in a powerful president. I do believe in presidential power, but power and constraint are not at fundamental odds.
What is the principle?
Power.
What is the principle? The legal principle. You've referenced prudence. You've referenced the judges you don't like. What's the principle of when an injunction binding non-parties, which was never done in this country before the 1960s? And let's see the chart, the Trump chart, which was done really only once Trump came into office for the first time. You don't think this is a little bit anomalous? You don't think that's a little bit strange?
A very plausible explanation, Senator, you have to consider is that he is engaged in much more lawless activity than other presidents, right?
You don't think
you must
this was never
possibility.
used before the 1960s, and suddenly Democrat judges decide we love the nationwide injunction, and then when Biden comes to office, no, actually.
It's Republican appointees as well, Senator, and the 1960s is where some scholars sort of locate the beginning of this, but others,
before then?
Mila Sohoni, who's another scholar of universal injunction, suggests 1913 is actually the first, and others in the 20s.
The Republic endured for 150 years before there was a nationwide injunction.
Well, the federal government was doing a lot less until 100 years ago. So there's many things that have changed in the last 100 or the last 50 years.
So long as it is a Democrat president in office, then we should have no nationwide injunctions. If it's a Republican president, then this is absolutely fine, warranted, and called for. How can our system of law survive on those principles, Professor?
I think a system in which there are no meaningful constraints on the president is a very dangerous system
That's
of law.
Not what you thought when Joe Biden. That is not what you thought when Joe Biden was
every
president.
You
is said that is not what you said. You said it was a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law. You also said
the Supreme Court senator agreed 9-0 with me on that.
You also said when Joe Biden was president, you said the idea that anyone would foreign shop to get a judge who would issue a nationwide injunction was just judges looking like politicians in robes. Again, it threatened the underlying legal system. People were just trying to get the result they wanted. It was a travesty for the rule of law. But you're fine with all of that if it's getting the result that you want.
Sir, the Supreme Court agreed unanimously with me in that case, right? There was no standing. The case should never have been allowed to proceed.
And
the combination of parties without standing and the single-judge division.
No. We're talking. No, they did not. They did not issue a ruling on the nationwide injunction. You criticized the injunction nationwide. Listen,
issued in a case where no one had standing.
Here's the thing. We've now gone 6 minutes, and Senator Kennedy had you for 6 or 7. You couldn't identify a single principled basis. We all know the truth here, which is it's not just you. It's most of my colleagues over here on this side of the aisle, who I respect a great deal, and they were raising very principled objections to the nationwide injunction just 6 months ago, maybe 9 now. And you're probably right. My point is that all that's changed in 9 months is the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I realize that my colleagues on this side of the aisle very much dislike that individual, and I realize that you think that the rulings that he has lost are fundamentally sound. We might grant all of that. I disagree with all of that, but we can put that to one side. The question we're talking about here is, should judges, single judges, district court judges, be able to bind non-parties who are not in front of them? And you used to say no, now you say yes. Let's be consistent. I would just suggest to you our system of government cannot survive if it's going to be politics all the way down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I briefly respond?
Sure.
I mean, you invoked democracy a couple of times there, Senator. Judges are part of our system of democracy. Democracy is not as simple as majority rule. Judges have always served something of a
You would have it be as simple as
function.
majority rule. When you get the majority you like, you're for the nationwide injunction. When you don't, you're not.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to give you the opportunity that I often found absolutely precious when I was arguing before a panel of judges and couldn't get my answer out. I'm going to give you some of my time to just say what you were going to say to Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Senator.
I can't interrupt you.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
I'll take some of your time.
I started to say this.
By the way, we're good friends, so it's not personal.
Well, maybe I'll just finish what I started saying at the end, which is, in a number of the questions today, there has been this embedded premise that there's something democratically troubling about judges issuing these nationwide injunctions, constraining the democratically elected president. And I guess I would just say in response that, we have a constitutional democracy, so the people are sovereign, and that's, the sovereignty flows from the people, and we do choose our elected representatives, but obviously we choose our representatives in Congress. Congress passes statutes, the president signs them, and many of the rulings we are talking about were predicated on executive branch violations of statutes that Congress passed. So the rulings in many ways are about protecting and reinforcing democracy. And then finally, I'll say that, courts are part of our democracy, right? They have served this rights protecting and democracy facilitating function from basically the beginning, whatever the original design of the Constitution was. And it is not undemocratic or anomalous for courts to sometimes strike down acts of the president or of Congress when they conflict with the fundamental law, which is the Constitution, which in our system, courts have long had the primary role in enforcing.
And in fact, just as a footnote to this conversation, Congress has an obligation to follow the Constitution too, correct?
Absolutely. The president does, Congress does, every official, state and federal takes an oath to uphold the Constitution, but where that oath does not appear to be fully honored by one or more other actors in government. Sometimes courts do need to step into the breach. I think that is what we have been seeing.
And I can't remember exactly what that chart said, but so far in the lawsuits that have been brought, the administration or the president has lost, I would say, a vast majority of times. Is that correct?
The vast majority, yes,
Let
Senator.
me ask you something, friends. What kind of country are we living in when the rules change depending on who's in the White House? When Barack Obama was in office, the courts were praised for restraint. When Trump was elected, it suddenly became open season from a bench. Nationwide injunctions, those are rulings that affect not just the plaintiffs in a case, but everybody, everywhere, were rare before the 1960s. And yet, they've exploded during the Trump years. Why? Because the radical left discovered they could forum shop pick a friendly judge in a blue district and have that judge effectively veto the President of the United States. Single judges binding non-parties was never done before the 1960s. Exactly. This didn't happen under Reagan. It didn't happen under Bush. It happened under Trump because the establishment both in D.C. and in the ivory towers were terrified of a president who didn't play by their rules. Let's give credit where it's due. Senator Hawley absolutely obliterated Professor Shaw on this point. He asked him one simple question: what principle determines when a nationwide injunction is appropriate? And guess what? Professor Shaw couldn't answer. Not once. Look, I've debated enough liberals to know this playbook by heart. When they like the result, they're all about justice. When they don't like the result, it's a threat to democracy. They twist words. They hide behind vague notions of prudence and judicial discretion, but they can't give you a straight answer because they don't have one. Here's the truth: if you don't have a consistent principle, you don't have justice. You have politics. You have a system where the elite lawyers and professors play puppet master with our Constitution. And that, my fellow Americans, is tyranny wearing a judge's robe. You know what really gets me fired up? These professors like Shaw keep pretending they're protecting democracy. They say, we're just making sure presidents follow the law. But here's the kicker: they only seem to find legal violations when a Republican is in office. You want to talk about lawlessness? Let's talk about Biden's open border policies. Let's talk about his unconstitutional student loan forgiveness scheme. Let's talk about how this administration ignores federal law when it's inconvenient. But somehow no universal injunctions come flying out of California or New York courts when Biden does it. Funny how that works, right? And of course, Professor Shaw trots out the old Marbury versus Madison excuse: judges have impacted non-parties since 1803. Don't fall for that. Marbury didn't grant federal judges the power to issue nationwide injunctions. Establish judicial review, not judicial supremacy. The founders gave us a judiciary that interprets the law, not one that rules the nation. A single unelected judge from a blue city should not be able to override the will of 75 million Americans who voted for President Trump. Period. Let's not kid ourselves, folks. This isn't just about legal theory. This is about raw political power. Democrat-aligned groups brought lawsuit after lawsuit against Trump over immigration, over executive orders, over anything they could twist into a constitutional crisis. They weren't seeking justice. They were seeking to stop the America First agenda by any means necessary. And they used these nationwide injunctions like a baseball bat. Didn't like the travel ban? Sue. Didn't like the border wall? Sue. Didn't like Trump's stance on abortion, energy, school choice? Sue, sue, sue until you found a Clinton or Obama-appointed judge who'd rule from the bench. Really? More than Obama? More than FDR? That's not law, that's narrative. And it's the left's favorite one, Paint Trump as a dictator so you can justify extreme measures to stop him, even if it means destroying the Constitution in the process. Now Shaw and his allies will say, well, courts are part of democracy. That's true, but they are not kings. They are not meant to rule us. Democracy means self-government. It means we the people choose our leaders, not 9 robed elites or one ambitious district court judge. You don't get to override the results of a national election by filing a lawsuit in San Francisco or Brooklyn. That's not democracy. That's lawfare. Friends, let's be clear. The real threat to the rule of law isn't Donald Trump. It's the selective enforcement of it. It's judges who see their role not as referees, but as warriors for a political cause. You don't defend the Constitution by bending it whenever it suits your ideology. That's what banana republics do. That's what tyrants do. Our founders warned us about this. They designed a system where power is balanced, where courts don't become super legislatures, and where the president isn't hamstrung by every judge with an agenda. And now, that system is under attack not by Trump, but by professors like Shaw who think their academic pedigree entitles them to rewrite the rules of the republic. So what do, patriots? Number 1, we elect senators like Josh Hawley who are willing to call this out. He didn't back down. He exposed the hypocrisy with clarity and courage. Number 2, we demand judicial restraint. We call for the end of nationwide injunctions issued by single judges. This is not justice. It's a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. Number 3, we fight this battle culturally. We expose the academic elites who dress up their bias in legal jargon. We remind our fellow Americans that the Constitution belongs to them, not the Harvard Law faculty. If you believe in liberty, if you believe in the rule of law, if you believe that this country was founded to limit government, not to empower it, then it's time to stand up. It's time to say, no more judicial tyranny, no more double standards, no more bending the law to crush your political opponents. Because if we let them get away with this, if we allow the left to redefine justice based on who's in office, then we no longer live in a republic. We live under rule by legal elites. And I, for one, will not bow to that. So to Professor Shaw and all the other so-called experts who think it's okay to rewrite the rules for Trump but cry foul when it's Biden, we see you. We know the game. And we're not playing by your rules anymore. This is America. We are governed by laws, not by men, not by professors, and certainly not by activist judges. Let's take back the courts. Let's take back the Constitution. And let's take back our country.